This is the strangest apple pie recipe I've ever come across. Welcome back to Vintage Recipe here, where this week we are making an interesting apple pie. This week's recipe is from the Women's Day Encyclopedia of Cookery, and it's called caramel apple pie. So what I was expecting was your traditional lattice top apple pie with maybe some caramel stuck in there. But this pie is not that pie. This pie actually had me doing a little bit of a deep dive on Google to figure out what it's similar to. Because for this pie, we are making a caramel and we're going to pour that over the apples. However, where this pie gets a little bit strange is in that we only have one crust, and this crust is going on the top of the pie. And then 10 minutes after we take it out of the oven, we are going to flip this pie, making an upside down apple pie with one crust. So all the apples and caramels will be sitting on top of this crust, which to me sounds more like a tarte tatin than an apple pie. However, similar to an apple pie, we are not cooking these apples. We are simply putting them into the pie filling. But there's one more thing that makes this strange. Normally for an apple pie, we have some sort of lemon juice or acidic element. This is to help with not only flavor, but to keep the apples from turning brown. Though actually, the best way to keep your apples from turning brown is to soak them in salt water. Anyways, what we're doing with these apples is we're actually tossing and soaking them in dark rum. And then before we put them into our pie plate, we are draining the rum. I did a Google search, and rum does not keep your apples from going brown, especially not dark rum. So I'm assuming that this is just for a flavor element and that the recipe doesn't want you to add any extra liquid. Now, you might be thinking, why not just use a rum extract? Well, it doesn't compare to real rum. So I'm not sure how this recipe is going to turn out this week. I really hope it's a delicious autumn classic and a great apple pie that you can quickly whip up at home. However, if it's a fail, and I'm still gonna post this video so we can all learn from this recipe. So let's get started on this caramel apple pie, one crust pie, pseudo kind of tarte tatin thing right now. Okay, let's measure 4 cups. Now, as you saw, I chopped up 7 apples instead of 6. And that's because just in case I had one that was a little bit bruised, or I wanted to try some, or it didn't quite make the right amount that I needed, like if some of them were too small. It looks like I have way more than 4 cups of apples, so you may not even need 6 apples. It looks like I would have been fine with 5. Yeah. I have a lot of apples left. So what I'm gonna do next is pour the rum over and toss them and forget about them. Rum is not for me. However, in baking, I can accept it. Oh God, that smells like university. Okay, my apples have been tossed in rum. I have been doused in rum, and I'm gonna let these sit here and I'm gonna make my pastry. One tip I wanna give you right away is I should have started with my pastry, but you know what? I will make my pastry and then continue on with this. Okay, we're going to make the pastry recipe now that is associated with this recipe. If you have your own favorite pastry recipe, or if you have like a roll of Pillsbury in your fridge or freezer, you're free to use that. I'm just curious to see what their pastry tastes like with the recipe and kind of taste how they intended this to taste. So we're going to need 1 cup of sifted flour. Then we need to add in half a teaspoon of salt. Then we have to cut in our shortening or lard. I have chosen to go with lard because I love how flaky and sweet it makes pastry. And I have my 3rd cup and 1 tablespoon. I'm gonna break this in with my fingers, just mix the salt in there a little bit first. So I do recommend making your pastry first for this recipe and then wrapping it in plastic wrap or reusable wrap and putting it in the fridge to wait for you, then start your apples, then make your caramel, then make your pie. Okay, that's pretty well cut in. So they then recommend 2 tablespoons at a time, adding water into this and gently working it in with a fork, trying not to develop that gluten so much. So 1 tablespoon, 2 tablespoons. I'm using ice water to keep this super cool so that I don't melt my lard. So we just want to add enough liquid so that all the flour has absorbed a little bit, but it's not sopping wet. I actually do not like using a fork for this. It looks like this is almost coming together. When you can make a sort of ball out of your pastry, it is time to stop touching it. On my plastic wrap, I am going to just kind of push this into more of a puck shape instead of a ball. I've said it before, but this will help your dough chill more quickly, and when you go to roll it out, you've already got a little bit of a head start. I'm going to put this in the fridge now and get started on my caramel. Okay, so it says to add your 1 cup of sugar and you heat it over low, stirring constantly until the sugar starts to burn. Now I understand that they want you to stir this constantly so that it burns evenly and you don't have some white sugar and some like really dark bits that are already caramelized. But normally when I make caramel, I'm told like don't stir the sugar, just shift the pot a little bit and like don't touch it until it's completely liquid. So I don't know, I'm gonna follow their instructions as best as I can though. Okay, you can see now it's started to melt a little bit. Now quite a bit of it has melted. You can see how lumpy and crystally this is getting. I kind of wish that I used a bigger pot, but live and learn. Starting to turn a little bit of a yellowy color and we've got less lumps. It's melting down. Be very careful at this stage when you're stirring. You do not want to get this on your skin. You do not want to splash this in your eyes. Okay, I'm gonna add the butter now. It will sizzle. Ooh, doesn't that look nice? Wow. Note to self, use a really big pot next time. Looks like honeycomb right now. Okay, there's my caramel. It's time to assemble this pie. Probably good enough. Yep, that's good enough. So this is what the baked pie looks like before we flip it. The pie has been resting for 10 minutes. Now it's time for the really scary part, which is flipping the pie. I have my nice white display plate here, which, yes, I did buy especially for this channel. Yeah, it looks like it's gonna fit. Okay. Before I attempt to flip this, I just wanna make sure that it's not stuck by going around the edges. Ooh, flaky pastry. Also, I hate that sound. Okay, here we go. I only get one shot at this. Oh my God. Oh, oh, I felt it. Oh my God. This is what it looks like up close. Oh my goodness. The apples got so dark. When I put the apples into the bottom of the pie plate, you saw they were still fairly white. So it's the caramel that they've absorbed. These really are caramel apples. The crust came out perfectly when I flipped it all in one piece, and it looks really flaky, which is why I love lard crusts. I'm ready to taste this. I really hope it's delicious. So this is kind of like if a tarte tatin and an apple pie had a baby. Wow, slice came out perfect. It's still warm. In the recipe, it does say serve warm or cold, so you don't have to eat it right away. I assume that also means that it might taste nice the next day too. My first impression is that it's very deeply caramelly, and I can taste a little hint of that rum. I'm gonna take another bite and see if I can get more of a wow with it. Okay, here's what I think about this pie. Number one, the crust is fantastic. Great crust recipe. Use lard if you're not a vegetarian. It's flaky and light and lovely. Number two, I do love the idea of just having a bottom crust and having the top crust turn into the bottom crust, because it means that our bottom crust is crisp and flaky as opposed to have soaked up all the juices. Things I would do differently about this: I would cut my apples thicker, more like a tarte tatin. In a tarte tatin, you generally quarter your apples. This one said to slice them, so I sliced them, and I used two different types of apples, Granny Smith and Macintosh, hoping to get some variation in textures, but I don't have any variation. All the apples are completely soft. That's not my preference. If it's yours, then by all means, make it as the recipe says. The only other thing I would change is honestly the caramel. It's giving me a bit of a burnt caramel taste. I would, in the future, if I make this pie again, pull my caramel off the pan and add the butter when it's a very, very light brown. Because when this is baking in the oven, the sugar is going to continue to caramelize with that heat. Caramel tastes fantastic when you take it really dark up to a certain point, and when you get past that point, it gives you this burnt flavor. All in all, this is not a bad pie. I love this idea. It was simple to make, and who doesn't love apples and caramel? As it is, making the pie by this recipe, I would rate this 5 out of 10. It's not super delicious, but it's not horrible. Well, not every pie can be a winner. However, we can learn from these recipes and perfect them ourselves with our own tweaks and in our own homes. I hope that you've learned a lot this week, as I have also learned a lot. I hope that you try making this pie, but add your own twist to it, because the idea, the core of it, is really good. No pun intended. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next week for another hopefully successful recipe on Vintage Recipe Hero. Bye.